In the quiet town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, lived a young woman named Emily Carter. She was a librarian, known for her gentle demeanor and love for classic literature. Her days were spent cataloging books and assisting patrons, while her evenings were reserved for reading and solitude. Unbeknownst to Emily, someone had been watching her for months. It started innocuously enough: an extra book left on her desk, a note tucked between the pages. At first, she thought it was a friendly gesture from a colleague or a patron. But as the notes became more frequent and personal, she began to feel uneasy. One evening, as she closed the library and stepped into the dimly lit parking lot, she noticed a figure standing at the far end, just beyond the reach of the streetlight. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge her presence. Emily quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. The next day, another note appeared on her desk. "I see you." The handwriting was the same as before, neat, deliberate, and chilling. Emily's unease deepened into fear. She began to wonder if the figure from the parking lot had been watching her for longer than she realized. Determined to find out, Emily started paying closer attention to her surroundings. She noticed a man who frequented the library, always sitting in the same corner, always watching her. His name was Thomas Granger, a quiet man in his late 30s who lived alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Emily's suspicions grew. She began to keep a journal, noting every strange occurrence, every unsettling encounter. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't prove that Thomas was the one leaving the notes. He was always careful, always just out of reach. Then, one evening, as Emily was locking up the library, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see a late patron, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She hurried to her car, glancing over her shoulder with every step. That night, she received a phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, unrecognizable. "I know where you live," it said, before the line went dead. Emily's blood ran cold. She had never given out her address to anyone. How could they know? The next day, she went to the police. They took her concerns seriously but had little to go on. Without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. Emily felt helpless, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. As the days passed, the notes continued. Each one more personal, more invasive than the last. Emily began to feel like she was losing her grip on reality. Was she imagining things? Or was someone truly watching her every move? Then, one morning, she found a package waiting for her at the library. Inside was a book. Her favorite novel, the one she had mentioned in passing to a colleague months ago. It was inscribed with a message: "I know you better than you think." Fear turned to dread as Emily realized the stalker knew her intimately, perhaps better than she knew herself. She couldn't escape. She couldn't hide. And she couldn't trust anyone. As the days stretched into weeks, Emily Carter's sense of normalcy began to erode. The once comforting routine of her daily life now felt like a fragile facade, concealing a growing terror that gnawed at her from within. The notes continued to appear, each one more unsettling than the last. They were no longer just words on paper, they were threats, promises, and glimpses into a mind that had become fixated on her. One morning, as Emily arrived at the library, she found a note slipped under the door. It read, "I know your favorite book. I know your coffee order. I know your every move." The handwriting was the same, neat, deliberate, and chilling. But this time, there was something more. The note was accompanied by a small, delicate charm, an antique key, tarnished with age. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen the charm before, yet it felt intimately personal, as if it had been chosen specifically for her. That evening, as she closed the library, Emily noticed something unusual. The streetlight near her car flickered erratically, casting long, eerie shadows across the parking lot. She quickened her pace, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. As she reached her car, she glanced over her shoulder and froze. Standing at the far end of the lot was a figure, tall, cloaked in darkness, and unmoving. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Thomas Granger. Their eyes met for a brief, heart-stopping moment before Emily scrambled into her car and locked the doors. She watched in the rearview mirror as Thomas remained rooted to the spot, his gaze never leaving her. With trembling hands, she started the engine and drove away, her mind racing. Was he the one leaving the notes? Had he been watching her all along? The next day, Emily decided to confront her fears head-on. She approached Thomas at the library, trying to appear casual, though her heart pounded in her chest. "Hi, Thomas," she said, forcing a smile. "I couldn't help but notice you last night. Is everything okay?" Thomas looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine," he replied curtly. "Just needed some fresh air." Emily nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. His response was too rehearsed, too perfect. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Later that day, Emily received another note. This one was different. It was a photograph of her, taken from a distance, as she had spoken to Thomas. The caption read, "I see everything." Chills ran down her spine. She had been watched, observed, and now it was documented. Determined to protect herself, Emily installed security cameras around her home and at the library. She also began to carry pepper spray and took self-defense classes. But no matter what precautions she took, the feeling of being hunted never left her. One evening, as Emily sat in her living room, reviewing footage from her security cameras, she noticed something odd. In the background of one video, a shadowy figure moved across her yard. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it was there. Her heart raced. Had someone been lurking outside her window? The next day, Emily decided to take a different route to work, hoping to avoid any potential encounters. As she drove through the winding streets, she felt a sense of unease settle over her. The world outside her car seemed distant, unreal. She was hyper-aware of every movement, every sound. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar figure on the sidewalk, Thomas. He was walking in the same direction as her car, his pace matching hers. Her stomach dropped. How had he known she would be here? Emily's mind raced as she drove past him, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. She couldn't let him know she was aware of his presence. But as she glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw him turn and begin to follow her. Panic surged through her. She needed to lose him. She made a sharp turn onto a side street, hoping to shake him off. But when she looked behind her, he was still there, his figure a constant shadow in her mirror. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't outrun him forever. She needed help. But who could she trust? The police had been little help before. And Thomas had been so careful, so elusive. As she approached a busy intersection, Emily made another quick turn, this time into a crowded parking lot. She parked her car and sat there, breathing heavily, watching as Thomas drove past without slowing down. She had lost him, for now. But Emily knew this was far from over. The game had changed. And she was no longer just a victim. Emily Carter spent the next few days in a state of heightened alertness. The unsettling events had left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. She couldn't shake the image of Thomas Granger standing in the parking lot, his gaze fixed on her, as if he were waiting for her to make a move. Her thoughts were consumed by the possibility that he was the one leaving the notes, watching her every step. Determined to regain some sense of control, Emily began to document every encounter, every strange occurrence. She kept a detailed journal, noting the time, date, and nature of each incident. The entries were meticulous, a testament to her growing paranoia and fear. One evening, as she reviewed her notes, a pattern began to emerge. The incidents seemed to coincide with specific dates, her days off, weekends, and holidays. It was as if someone knew her schedule, knew when she would be alone. The realization sent a chill down her spine. The next day, Emily decided to confront Thomas. She needed answers, needed to know if he was the one behind the notes. She found him at the library, sitting in his usual corner, engrossed in a book. His presence was both comforting and unsettling. "Thomas," Emily began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Can we talk?" He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Of course," he replied, setting the book aside. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Finally, Emily spoke. "I need to know if you're the one leaving the notes," she said, her eyes searching his face for any sign of guilt. Thomas's brow furrowed in confusion. "What notes?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "The notes that have been appearing at the library, at my home. The ones that say I see you. The ones that have a charm attached." Thomas shook his head, his expression one of genuine bewilderment. "Emily, I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't left any notes." His words were calm, convincing. But Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was hiding something. "Are you sure?" she pressed. "Yes," Thomas replied firmly. Emily studied him for a moment longer, searching for any sign of deceit. But there was none. He seemed sincere. "Okay," she said finally, standing up. "Thanks for talking to me." As she walked away, Emily felt a sense of unease settle over her. Had she been wrong about Thomas? Or was he simply a master at hiding his true intentions? The next few days passed without incident. Emily went about her routine, trying to push the thoughts of the stalker to the back of her mind. But the sense of dread lingered, a constant companion. Then, one evening, as she was locking up the library, Emily received a phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, unrecognizable. "I know you're looking for answers," the voice said. "But some questions are better left unanswered." The line went dead. Emily stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her heart raced as the implications of the call sank in. Who was watching her? And why? She glanced around the empty parking lot, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. But there was nothing. The next day, Emily decided to take action. She contacted the police again, providing them with the latest information. But the response was the same as before. Without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. Frustrated and scared, Emily turned to her friends and family for support. They listened, offered comfort, but there was little they could do to help her feel safe. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's fear grew. She couldn't escape the feeling that someone was always watching, always waiting. And the worst part was, she didn't know who it was. Then, one evening, as she was walking home from the library, Emily noticed something strange. A car was parked across the street, its engine running. She couldn't see the driver, but the car seemed to be waiting for her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder. The car remained where it was, unmoving. When she reached her front door, Emily turned to look back. The car was gone. But the sense of being watched remained. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily heard a noise outside her window. She held her breath, straining to listen. The phone call had left Emily shaken, its cryptic message echoing in her mind. "I know you're looking for answers, but some questions are better left unanswered." She couldn't escape the feeling that someone was always watching her, always waiting. Determined to regain control, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Emily began to delve deeper into her own life, retracing her steps, reviewing her interactions, and analyzing every detail for any clue that might lead her to the identity of the stalker. She meticulously examined her social media accounts, scrutinizing every comment and message for signs of familiarity or hidden meaning. One evening, as she scrolled through her messages, a particular comment caught her eye. It was from an account she didn't recognize, but the message was oddly specific. "I saw you at the coffee shop this morning. You looked lost in thought." The detail was unsettling. Emily hadn't mentioned her visit to the coffee shop online. How did this person know? The next day, Emily decided to visit the library again, hoping to find some answers. As she entered, she noticed a man sitting at a table near the back, his eyes fixed on a book. His presence felt oddly familiar. She couldn't place him, but something about him made her uneasy. She approached the desk, trying to act casual. "Hi, I was wondering if you could help me find a book on local history?" The librarian smiled. "Of course. Let me show you." As they walked toward the shelves, Emily glanced back at the man. He was still watching her, his gaze unwavering. Her heart raced as she tried to shake off the feeling of being hunted. That evening, as Emily returned home, she found another note taped to her door. It was identical to the others, "I see you." But this time, there was something different. Attached to the note was a small charm, a silver key. It was delicate and intricately designed, unlike anything Emily owned. She stared at the charm, her mind racing. Was this a message? A clue? Or just another attempt to unsettle her? She couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain: the stalker was escalating. Determined to confront her fears head-on, Emily decided to speak with Thomas again. She needed to know if he was involved or if she was simply imagining things. She found him at the library, as usual, sitting in his corner. This time, she walked directly up to him. "Thomas," she began, her voice steady but firm. "We need to talk." He looked up, surprised. "Emily? What's going on?" "I need to know if you're the one leaving the notes," she said, her eyes searching his face for any sign of guilt. Thomas frowned, clearly confused. "I told you before, I haven't left any notes." "I don't know what you're talking about." Emily studied him for a moment longer, trying to discern any hint of deception. But there was none. He seemed genuinely perplexed. "Okay," she said finally, her resolve hardening. "But if you know anything, if you've seen anything, you need to tell me." Thomas nodded. "I will. I promise." As Emily left the library, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced around, but the streets were empty. Still, the sensation lingered, a constant presence at the edge of her awareness. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily heard a noise outside her window. She held her breath, straining to listen. There it was again, a faint scratching sound. She sat up, heart pounding, but when she peered outside, there was nothing. The next day, Emily decided to install security cameras around her home. She couldn't afford to take any chances. She needed to feel safe again. As she reviewed the footage the following evening, her blood ran cold. There, in the shadows just beyond the reach of the camera's view, was a figure standing motionless. It was impossible to make out any details, but the presence was unmistakable. Emily's fear deepened. The stalker was closer than she had realized. And now, they were watching her every move. The web of fear and uncertainty continued to tighten around Emily. With each passing day, the stalker's presence became more palpable, more invasive. She couldn't escape the feeling that she was being hunted, that every step she took was being monitored. But Emily refused to be a victim. She would uncover the truth, no matter how deep she had to dig. She would confront the shadows and bring them into the light. The game was on. And Emily was determined to win. Emily's sense of unease deepened as the days passed. The note with the silver key had been a chilling reminder that the stalker was still watching her, still playing their twisted game. She had hoped that confronting Thomas would bring some clarity, but instead, it had only added to her confusion. Was he involved? Or was he just another pawn in this macabre chess game? One evening, as Emily sat in her living room, reviewing the security footage again from the past week, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the corner of the frame, just beyond the reach of the camera's view, a shadowy figure stood motionless. It was impossible to make out any details, but the presence was unmistakable. Her heart raced as she rewound the footage, watching the figure again. It was always there, lurking just out of sight, waiting. Emily felt a surge of panic. How had they managed to remain hidden for so long? Determined to uncover the truth, Emily decided to take a different approach. She began to retrace her steps, revisiting places she had been, people she had spoken to, looking for any clue that might lead her to the stalker's identity. One afternoon, she visited the coffee shop where she had been seen by the mysterious commenter. As she entered, the barista greeted her with a warm smile. "Hi, Emily," she said. "The usual?" Emily nodded, surprised that the barista remembered her. As she waited for her coffee, she noticed a man sitting in the corner, his eyes fixed on her. He was the same man she had seen at the library. Her heart skipped a beat. Could he be the one? She approached him cautiously. "Excuse me," she said. "Do I know you?" The man looked up, his expression unreadable. "I don't think so," he replied. "But I've seen you around." Emily studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his intentions. "I don't mean to be rude," she said, "but I have to ask. Are you following me?" The man's eyes widened in surprise. "No," he said quickly. I just noticed you." Emily didn't know what to make of his response. Was he telling the truth? Or was he lying? "I see," she said, her voice steady. "Well, please don't follow me." The man nodded, his face flushed with embarrassment. As Emily left the coffee shop, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just uncovered another piece of the puzzle. But was it the right piece? That night, Emily sat in her living room, staring at the silver key. She had no idea what it meant, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that it was important. She picked up her phone and dialed Thomas's number. "Hello?" he answered. "Thomas," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I need your help." There was a pause on the other end. "What happened?" he asked, concern evident in his tone. Emily explained everything, the notes, the silver key, the shadowy figure in the footage. "I don't know who to trust anymore," she admitted. "I don't know who is watching me." Thomas was silent for a moment. "Emily," he said finally, "I want to help you. But I need you to trust me." Emily hesitated. Could she trust him? "Okay," she said at last. "I trust you." "Good," Thomas replied. "We'll figure this out together." As Emily ended the call, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. The following days were a blur of activity. Emily and Thomas worked together, analyzing the notes, the silver key, the footage, looking for any clue that might lead them to the stalker's identity. They discovered that the silver key was a replica of a key from a local antique shop. The shop owner confirmed that he had sold several such keys, but he couldn't remember to whom. They also found that the shadowy figure in the footage had been appearing at different locations, always just out of sight, always watching. But despite their efforts, the stalker's identity remained a mystery. Then, one evening, as Emily was reviewing the footage again, she noticed something new. In the background of one of the frames, a figure stood in the distance, partially obscured by a tree. Her heart raced as she zoomed in on the figure. It was a man, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. Could this be the stalker? Emily sent the image to Thomas. "This is it," he replied. "We have a lead." The discovery of the shadowy figure in the security footage marked a turning point for Emily. It was no longer just a matter of unsettling notes and eerie messages, she had a tangible lead. Determined to uncover the identity of her stalker, she and Thomas began to investigate the figure's appearance and movements. They started by analyzing the footage frame by frame, trying to glean any detail that might help identify the person. The figure was always in the periphery, never fully visible, but certain characteristics began to emerge: a distinctive gait, a particular way of standing, and the outline of a jacket with a unique pattern. Using these details, Emily and Thomas visited local businesses, showing the footage to employees and asking if anyone recognized the figure. After several days of inquiries, they received a breakthrough. A clerk at a nearby convenience store recalled seeing a man matching the description, purchasing a specific brand of cigarettes. The brand of cigarettes was a rare one, not commonly found in the area. Emily and Thomas expanded their search to local tobacco shops, showing the footage and asking if anyone had purchased the same brand recently. At one shop, the owner recognized the man as a regular customer who had been coming in for years. The owner provided a name, Richard Mallory. He was a local handyman with a reputation for being reclusive and a bit odd. Emily's heart raced as she Googled his name. What she found shocked her. Richard Mallory had a criminal record. Years ago, he had been arrested for stalking a former girlfriend, though the charges were dropped when she refused to testify. There were also rumors about him being involved in other unsettling incidents, but nothing had ever been proven. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Could this be the same man who had been tormenting her? She needed to find out more. One afternoon, Emily decided to confront Richard Mallory. She found his address through public records and drove to his house. It was a small, dilapidated cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and a rusted fence. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. After a long pause, the door creaked open. Richard Mallory stood there, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff. "I'm Emily," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to ask you some questions." Richard's expression shifted from curiosity to suspicion. "About what?" "About the notes," Emily replied. "About the silver key." Richard's face paled. He stepped back, as if to close the door, but Emily quickly wedged her foot in the opening. "Please," she pleaded. "I need to know the truth." Richard hesitated, then sighed deeply. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice trembling. Emily studied him closely. There was something in his eyes, fear, guilt, or perhaps both. "Please," she said again. "If you know anything, you have to tell me." Richard looked away, his shoulders slumping. "I can't," he whispered. "I'm sorry." With that, he closed the door, leaving Emily standing on the porch, more confused and unsettled than ever. As Emily drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard Mallory knew more than he was letting on. His reaction had been too strong, too defensive. But what was he hiding? Determined to find out, Emily decided to dig deeper into Richard's past. She contacted his former neighbors, co-workers, and anyone who might have information about him. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to come together. But with each revelation, Emily felt herself being drawn further into a web of lies and deceit. The line between friend and foe was becoming increasingly blurred. And as the truth began to surface, Emily realized that the person she had been trusting all along might not be who they seemed. The investigation was taking its toll on Emily. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The constant fear, the sleepless nights, the never-ending questions, it was all becoming too much. But she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. One evening, as she sat at her desk, reviewing her notes, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Emily," a voice said, low and menacing. "You're getting too close." Her blood ran cold. It was the stalker. "Who is this?" she demanded. "Someone who knows everything about you," the voice replied. "Someone who's been watching you." Emily's mind raced. How had they found her? Emily sat frozen, the phone pressed to her ear, her mind racing. The voice on the other end was cold, deliberate, and unmistakably threatening. "You're getting too close," the voice repeated, sending a chill down her spine. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain composed. "Someone who's been watching you," the voice replied, the words dripping with malice. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to hang up, to disconnect from this nightmare. But she couldn't. Not now. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to stop," the voice said simply. "Stop digging. Stop looking. Leave it alone." the line went dead. Emily stared at the phone in her hand, her mind reeling. This was no longer just a series of unsettling notes and cryptic messages. This was a direct threat. The following days were a blur of activity. Emily and Thomas continued their investigation, but the weight of the threat hung over them like a dark cloud. They knew they were being watched, knew that every move they made was under scrutiny. One evening, as they sat in Emily's living room, poring over the evidence, Thomas looked up from the papers spread before them. "Emily," he said quietly, "maybe it's time we consider going to the police." Emily met his gaze, her expression conflicted. She had been hesitant to involve law enforcement, unsure of how seriously they would take her concerns. "I don't know," she replied. "What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm overreacting?" Thomas reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "Emily," he said gently, "this isn't just your problem anymore. It's ours. And we can't do this alone." His words resonated with her. She had been carrying the burden of fear and uncertainty on her own for so long. Perhaps it was time to share that burden, to let others help. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady. "Let's go to the police." The next morning, Emily and Thomas visited the local police station. They were directed to Detective Harris, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for handling sensitive cases. As they sat across from him in his cramped office, Emily recounted the events that had led them there, the notes, the silver key, the shadowy figure in the footage, and the threatening phone call. Detective Harris listened intently, taking notes without interruption. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "This is serious," he said finally. "But we need more than just your word. We need evidence." Emily nodded, understanding the necessity. She had anticipated this response. "We have footage," she said, her voice tinged with hope. Detective Harris raised an eyebrow. "Show me," he said. They led him to Emily's car, where she had stored the security footage. As they played the video, Detective Harris scrutinized the images, his brow furrowing as he observed the shadowy figure lurking just beyond the camera's view. "This is unsettling," he murmured. Emily held her breath, waiting for his judgment. "We'll need to enhance this footage," he said finally. "And we'll need to track down this Richard Mallory. If he's involved, we need to know." Emily felt a surge of relief. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next several days, Detective Harris and his team worked tirelessly to enhance the security footage and trace Richard Mallory's whereabouts. They discovered that Mallory had a history of erratic behavior and had been involved in several minor incidents in the past. They also learned that Mallory had been in the vicinity of Emily's home on several occasions, though he had no apparent reason to be there. Despite these findings, there was still no concrete evidence linking Mallory to the stalking incidents. The case remained open, but progress was slow. Then, one evening, Emily received an unexpected call. "Emily," Detective Harris said, his voice urgent, "we've found something." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We traced the phone number that called you," he explained. "It was a burner phone registered under a false name. But we've managed to trace its last known location." Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. "Where?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "It's an old warehouse on the outskirts of town," Detective Harris replied. "We're going to check it out. We need you to stay home. Don't go anywhere." The call from Detective Harris left Emily in a state of heightened anxiety. Her mind raced with questions. What had they found? Was Richard Mallory truly involved? And most pressing of all, was she in immediate danger? Despite the detective's request for her to stay home, Emily felt an overwhelming urge to be part of the investigation. She couldn't sit idly by, not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. With Thomas by her side, she decided to drive to the outskirts of town, to the location of the old warehouse where the phone had last pinged. The warehouse stood isolated, its silhouette casting long shadows in the fading light of the evening. The area was eerily quiet, with no signs of activity. Emily and Thomas parked a distance away and approached on foot, careful to remain unseen. As they neared the building, they noticed a faint light flickering inside. It was a single bulb, hanging from the ceiling, casting an unsettling glow through a cracked window. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. "Should we go in?" Thomas whispered, his voice tense. Emily hesitated, then nodded. "We have to know." The door creaked loudly as they pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty space. Inside, the warehouse was filled with old furniture, boxes, and discarded items. It smelled of mildew and decay. They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the dust-covered floor. As they ventured deeper, Emily's eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for any sign of Mallory or evidence linking him to the stalking incidents. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence, a faint shuffle, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Thomas nodded, his face pale. "We need to get out of here." But before they could retreat, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Richard Mallory. His eyes widened in surprise upon seeing them. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and menacing. Emily stood her ground. "We know what you've been doing. The notes, the key, the phone calls. It's all you." Mallory's expression shifted, a flicker of something, guilt, fear, or perhaps both, passing across his face. He took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching into his jacket pocket. "You don't understand," he muttered, his voice trembling. Before Emily could respond, a loud voice interrupted. "Freeze! Police!" Detective Harris and several officers appeared at the entrance, guns drawn. Mallory froze, his face contorting in a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're under arrest for stalking, harassment, and attempted assault," Harris announced, stepping forward to cuff Mallory. As Mallory was led away, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. The nightmare was finally over. In the weeks that followed, Emily worked closely with Detective Harris and the police to piece together Mallory's actions. They discovered that Mallory had been using burner phones and fake identities to stalk and harass her, going so far as to plant the silver key and send the threatening messages. Further investigation revealed that Mallory had a history of similar behavior. Years ago, he had been arrested for stalking a former girlfriend, though the charges were dropped when she refused to testify. There were also rumors about him being involved in other unsettling incidents, but nothing had ever been proven. Mallory was charged with multiple counts of stalking, harassment, and attempted assault. At trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case, supported by the evidence Emily and Thomas had gathered. Mallory was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. With Mallory behind bars, Emily began the long process of healing. She sought therapy to address the trauma she had endured and worked to rebuild her sense of safety and trust. She also became an advocate for others who had experienced similar situations, speaking out about the importance of taking stalking seriously and supporting victims. Though the scars of her ordeal remained, Emily found strength in her journey. She had faced her fears, uncovered the truth, and emerged stronger on the other side. And as she looked toward the future, she knew one thing for certain: she would never let fear define her again. If you or someone you know is experiencing stalking or harassment, it's important to seek help. Contact your local law enforcement or a support organization for assistance.